The Unscaled Travel Show is brought to you by Seaboard Networks.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Unscaled Travel Show. I'm Jeremy Long, your host in Las Vegas, Nevada. And of course, every single week, we're in the Diamondback Land Surveying Studios. And today, we're taking one of America's great underrated road trips across South Dakota. We'll begin in Sioux Falls and make a wonderfully strange stop along Interstate 90 and a Palace of Corn, and eventually watch the open prairie transform into the jagged cliffs and colorful formations of Badlands National Park. Along the way, we're going to encounter some Roman bison, sprawling prairie dog towns, remnants of America's Cold War nuclear arsenal. Yeah, it's a weird mix out there. It's also a roadside attraction, another one that built an empire with free ice water. Yeah, you heard that right. This is South Dakota. Yeah, we got more than just Mount Rushmore. That should go on its bumper stickers. Now, this is part of the show where I would normally introduce my co-host and co-explorer, Amy. But unfortunately, Amy is sick this week, and we wish her a speedy recovery because she was with me on this trip. So was Chief, the adventure dog. We were out in Missouri, where Amy's parents live, visiting them, seeing some family, having a little personal time. And then we decided we were going to have an impromptu trip. And those are some of the best ones. So, beginning in Missouri, we decided, you know what, let's go to some places we've never been before together. And that would be heading up north, cutting across like Nebraska and Iowa, and really starting the trip in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Never been to Sioux Falls, never been to South Dakota, either one of us. So we wanted to head up that way as quickly as possible. And there in Sioux Falls, we of course wanted to see, we wanted to see the place that gave the city its name. And they have one. It's called Falls Park. Now you might be sitting there going, of course they have falls. I mean, it's called Sioux Falls and blah, blah, blah. But like, we've been to places before. And I believe one was like Wichita Falls. Wichita Falls, of course, is like Sioux Falls. It had a river and they had waterfalls. And it was named after those, Wichita Falls. But a flood came along years ago and wiped out those falls. And now the town is stuck with the name and no falls. So, like, was that the same thing happening here in Sioux Falls? We didn't know. We wanted to find out. But rest assured, hold your pearls. They're clutching. I know you're doing that. The falls are still active. They are still there. And I will say, if you have time for one stop in Sioux Falls, it has to be Falls Park. Okay, the park is composed of over 120 acres. It is a gorgeous park. And it's located just north of downtown, sits right along next to it, has plenty of parking. It's beautiful. It fits right into the park area, right into the downtown area, actually. We spent a little bit of time down there. So the Big Sioux River cuts through this area, and an average of 7,400 gallons of water drop over 100 feet over the course of the falls each second. That's a lot of movement of water, right? And the Falls Park also has a lot of different viewing platforms, including a 5-story observation tower. You climb that tower, you're rewarded with all kinds of beautiful views of not only the park, but the surrounding area. And there's a lot of history there too. The Queen Bee turbine house and also the Queen Bee mill are in this vicinity. You can go check out the history for yourself. But the Queen Bee Mill is really interesting to me, history nerd, okay, because it's the remains of a 7-story building. It was the brainchild of South Dakota's first senator, Mr. Richard Pettigrew, who wanted to see Sioux Falls be like the best mill around, the mill city around for the farmers of that area. Big dreams back in 1881. So the mill opened in October of that year and consisted, like I said, of that 7-story main structure. They spent nearly $500,000 constructing the state-of-the-art mill. And at the time of the construction, the mill was one of the most advanced in the United States. You got to tip your hat to all that. But the mill could process 1,500 bushels each day. I don't know if that's a lot. I guess since they included in the history, that is a lot of stuff to bushel, right? But like all things in 1880, for some reason, it just wasn't the decade here in the United States, because by 1883, the mill was closed. So 2 years later, the mill was closed. It was a victim of inadequate water power and a short supply of wheat. And I'm not laughing at people's bad fortune, but I am kind of laughing at just 2 years and $500,000. So anyway, you can go see the Queen Bee Mill, or what's left of it, the ruins of it. Of course, the main building burned down in 1956, so the walls are still standing. But you see the Queen Bee Mill, the Queen Bee Mill turbine, and of course the beautiful falls there. The other thing I would say go see, definitely if you have the time, is the Cathedral of St. Joseph. We stopped by very quickly. It's another landmark of the city. It was opened in 1919. And of course, it is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. It has 2 twin towers, has a limestone exterior, and it has an elevated location in the city's historic district that makes it kind of look even more unusually grand for a city the size of Sioux Falls. Not to pick on the size of Sioux Falls, but like, you wouldn't expect this just gorgeous cathedral to be here. It looks like it belongs in a well, I am going to insult people here, in a major city somewhere. But it's beautiful. It is a working cathedral, so be respectful and be mindful of that. But the doors were open. Amy and I walked in. We took some quick pictures and video of the inside of it. We'll post that. It is just immaculate. So anyway, those are 2 things. Definitely go, if you are passing through Sioux Falls, check those out. But if you get back on the interstate heading west on Interstate 90, I think this is where the scale of South Dakota really begins to register with you. Because in between all of these cities, you leave Sioux Falls, you see little cities like the namesake of, Humboldt or Montrose, Alexandria, out in the prairie somewhere, something called Salem. We have a history with towns called Salem. But like in between these towns, in between these little farming communities, just huge stretches of prairie, open land. You start seeing farms and grain elevators. And you also start to see something else, which I think is hilarious. A lot of billboards promising attractions that are hundreds of miles away. And I'm going to start saying it. You start seeing Wall drugstore billboards. And Wall, South Dakota, is still hundreds of miles away. It reminds me of the advertising that another store, Buc-ee's, that's very popular in the South, in Texas. They just opened one here in Arizona, but they used to do that. They would have a store and it would say Buc-ee's 120 miles away, just to get your attention. Now, that was nothing new. I mean, that was when I was younger as a kid. But of course, other roadside attractions did that. So expect to see Wall drugstore billboards as they begin to pop up. But you get to a town called Mitchell along the way. Mitchell, South Dakota. Okay, this is where one major roadside stop is. And it's a great place to stretch your legs, see some interesting history, buy a pen, grab a meal, okay? Because Mitchell is home to the world's only corn palace. And I have to say that I have a Southern accent, so sometimes my words can, have a funny sound to them. A corn palace. The first corn palace was built in 1892 with one sole purpose, and the purpose was serious, okay? Communities across this very prairie were using elaborate crop palaces to display their agricultural wealth. They were trying to show everyone up, like, look at what we can grow here. Look at what our farmers could do here. Mitchell was no different. It hoped its palace, its corn palace, in which I guess there were a number of these crop palaces everywhere. It hoped its palace would promote the region and help establish the city as a more important commercial center. And it was also a part of Mitchell's unsuccessful campaign to become the state capital. Now, we all know how that went. It fell short. And what is the state capital of South Dakota, you're asking? I'll have that answer for you. So, is the corn palace actually made of corn? That, of course, that's how my brain works. I was like, it's a corn palace. We've talked about it before on the show. It's been a part of like strange roadside attraction lore and everything. So I was curious. Is it all corn? If a fire starts out next door, are we getting a popcorn palace? Yeah, I know. That's a dad joke, right? But the building itself is permanent, bricks and mortar and steel and all that stuff. But its exterior decorations, they decorate the outside of the building. These are the things that are made from agricultural materials like corn. The murals usually use like naturally colored corn. They don't use paint. They use grains, native grasses, sometimes rye and dock, but it's mainly corn. So more than 275,000 ears of corn can be used during the annual decorating process. Again, the corn is not painted. They use different varieties of corn to provide the colors. The ears are cut and nailed into the building. A new theme is selected each and every year. This year, it's the America turns 250, so it's all about the United States celebrating 250 years. It was beautiful. We took pictures. Again, those are on the website. Weather and crop conditions, though, they can affect how much of the design is completed. But the Corn Palace is not merely a facade. It functions as a community arena. It hosts basketball games, concerts, festivals, community events, all kinds of stuff. It's really exciting. I loved visiting the Corn Palace. I'm going to tell you more about it when we come back. We're talking about our trip across South Dakota. It's an Unscaled Travel Show. Just old germ today. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unscaled Travel Show. Jeremy Long here in Sin City, Las Vegas, in the Diamondback Land Surveying Studios. Check us out online, unscaledtravelshow.com. It's just old germ today. Poor Miss Amy's sick. So you just get the guy. Yeah. How lucky for you. Just me and you hanging out. Popping the top of a cold one, talking about the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. So I was talking about the Corn Palace, and again, the outside of the Corn Palace, okay, is not just a facade. Right? It has the beautiful corn work and everything else, but it functions as this community like exhibit hall. In fact, when I went there, it was it was like a area artists doing things, like had little things on the ground, but they looked like they were warming up for a basketball game. We were walking through here. Admission is free, by the way. When a ticketed event is not taking place, you can just walk into the building and check it out. We walked in very quickly. Walked in, even from the outside, I smelled popcorn and butter, and my dumb brain was like, "Wow, the Corn Palace always smells like buttered popcorn. How do they do that? That's amazing to me." So we were looking around, and even, it's dog friendly too. As long as your dog is on a leash. We had Chief inside, and nobody batted an eye. People were petting him. He loved it. So you bring your dog in there as well. We're walking around on the floor, and like through the stairs, and they have the pictures. They have pictures from every mural going back to 1892 on the walls in there. Go check it out. They have some incredible stuff. But we finally are down to the bottom, and Amy's like, hold on, I'm going to go use the bathroom. There's some bathrooms located up front, and I'm walking around with Chief, and finally I see in the very back corner on the left-hand side when you walk in, people are making and bagging bags of popcorn for sale, or maybe they were just giving them away. But like, I was like, oh, there you go. That answers the butter question. So no, I don't think you should go around sniffing the building like I did, but I don't think people will blame you if you do. The lady didn't look at me twice. I guess I look like I wasn't from around there. So anyway, the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. Sniff at your own apparel. Apparel? No, that's not right. So anyway, we head back down I-90 West, driving fast because Amy was driving at this time period. I think I fell asleep through a lot of this. But once you come to, what's the area called? I think technically it's an area called Phillips, South Dakota. You come to an area called Phillips, South Dakota, and you start seeing the exit signs for Badlands, the 242. But there's also something very interesting just north of this exit. And it's called the Minuteman Missile National Historic Site and Visitor Center. If you don't know what the Minuteman Missile Program is, well, I'm about to shock you, right? The Minuteman missiles were all the underground missile silos that carried nuclear missiles that the United States always had two-man teams that basically lived underground with these missiles. So at a moment's notice, we could launch missiles at our enemies. And they are all over. Well, the remnants of them are in locations all across South Dakota. I believe South Dakota had 150 plus, at least 140. But there are there's at least one nearby. That's called the Delta 09 Minuteman missile site that they have a glass cover on, and you can look down and there's a dummy missile in there and you could take a picture of it and things like that. Now, if you go to like Google Maps, there are a couple of other locations that are marked. Now, these all have fences around them and everything, but I think they filled them all in. You can't like see anything or there's nothing there, but go check it out. It's extremely interesting. We didn't have a whole lot of time. So, because we were going to Badlands. So like that's on one side of the highway. On the other side is the entrance going into Badlands National Park. So Badlands National Park covers about 240,000 acres. So it's a pretty good sized park, but it's not huge by Yellowstone standards, which is 2.2 million acres. Okay. But it is one of the world's richest fossil beds. It is a major expanse of mixed grass prairie, and it is a habitat for bison, for bighorn sheep, for prairie dogs, and for, weird things like black-footed ferrets. Well, not weird, just things you don't see every day. They're not necessarily in your backyard. It receives approximately 1 million visitors in a typical year. Visitation reached roughly 1.14 million in 2025. So compared to like Yellowstone, which typically sees about 5 million plus visitors every single year, Badlands, I think just by association and by proximity, it sees about, 1 million plus, which is pretty good. The main paved road is approximately 30 miles, and it's called the Badlands Loop Road. Now, this is what most people do. There are tons of trailheads in Badlands that you can go and hike. It is a national park. We did have Chief, the adventure dog. He is not allowed in a lot of trailheads, he's not allowed on any trails, but he can go in certain little areas. But we weren't there necessarily to hike. We weren't prepared to, this was, again, an impromptu trip to just kind of check out the area and check out this national park. So we were mainly concerned about the loop and overlooks and hopefully seeing some animals from our vehicle. I say hopefully because when we went, it was extremely hot. Everyone that lived in that area that we talked to told us time and time again, wow, it is unusually hot for this time of year. Yes, it was July, but it was like 105 degrees the day we went to Badlands, which is kind of unusual. Or so we're told. Las Vegas, we didn't bat an eye, but we certainly expected to be a little bit cooler when we went here. So it was almost like visiting it in southern Nevada. Lots of fun. So how did the Badlands form? About 75 million years ago, a shallow inland sea covered the region, like a lot of places. Same thing happened here in Nevada. We had an inland sea that covered everything, right? So sediment settled on the bottom of the sea, formed what is now the park's oldest exposed layer, the Pierre Shell. After the sea retreated, rivers deposited additional sediment, floodplains covered the area, volcanic ash, different climates, layers of colored bands. Nowadays, layers of colored bands are visible through the park. Was that a good scientific enough reason and reading for you? Because I didn't just know that. I just had to read it off something. So anyway, I don't think I did that justice. I absolutely didn't. That was terrible. But where the shapes and everything come from, you can also find that, on your on a website. I won't bore you with all that. But needless to say, if the sediment began accumulating over tens of millions of years ago, erosion began carving them about 500,000 years ago, but with water being the primary sculptor. So rains, go into channels deepen into gullies widen into canyons, and the harder material remains behind as ridges and pinnacles. So you kind of have this, right as the prairie is going and you think there's no end in sight for the prairie, boom, all of a sudden you have these jagged peaks and pinnacles, and it's kind of mesmerizing. You're like, how does this just popping up in the middle of nowhere? But it also makes for interesting, like, fossil finds too. The park's fossil finds largely document the age of mammals rather than like the age of dinosaurs. So animals representing in the fossil record in this area are more akin to like early rhino or camels, ancient horses, saber-toothed tigers, turtles, things like that. Not so much the T-Rex and all that, although those kind of discoveries in South Dakota, they do find those too. So, but the park itself was created in 1929 as the Badlands National Monument, but the designation did not immediately take effect because there was still a lot of privately owned land, and it had to be acquired. A road had to be constructed through the proposed monument. Public access was essential to making the protected area viable. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, I'll just go with D there, formally established Badlands National Monument in 1939. It didn't become a national park until 1978. Some of us are old enough to remember that and go, oh yeah, I remember that. It was like a Saturday or something. So anyway, we go into the park. We start the loop. This is the major thing in the park. The first major viewpoint you get to is the big Badlands overlook. And I think more than anything, this is the proper introduction to the park. It is a broad view access across the formations. You can see from this overlook these clear geological bands. It has very little effort required to reach it. It's right off the road, plenty of parking, but you get like an immediate sense of the landscape scale. You get an immediate sense of what the rest of the park holds for you outside of seeing animals roam the lands, right? So again, it's hot. We're with Chief the Adventure Dog. You also need to know, like, there's areas with very limited shade. So limited shade, pet restrictions, and unusually high temperatures, we decided, again, the overlooks and the scenic road would be our primary experience for this. So if you want, I guess, a little more info on the trails or the best hiking trails or anything like that, I recommend going to a couple of different websites online, or just Google. Like Google is your friend in this kind of situation. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to anyone that I know the trails in Badlands National Park. Although I will say they have to be pretty popular because the park was very full and people looked like they were heading out, gonna have some fun. Not us. We needed that AC in that car. Not Chief. He's bougie. You don't deal with that. Keep it right here. Unscaled Travel Show with just old germ. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unscaled Travel Show. Check us out online, unscaledtravelshow.com. All of our past episodes and interviews. It's just old germ today. Amy's under the weather. Talk about our past episodes. We kind of did these last couple out of order. If you check us out on any of the major podcasting platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we keep them numbered. We keep them numbered for my sanity, not because I think most of these are like evergreen, unless you're listening to our very specific like Halloween or Christmas episodes or something like that. But most of these are like evergreen. So, but you can see where they're numbered just to keep my sanity in place. But if you go to episode 170, you'll see our adventures through Yellowstone, which technically came after this part, but we were fresh off of that adventure. We wanted to talk about that while everything from Yellowstone was still fresh on our minds. And then we came to this one because Badlands, of course, man, it helps you. Man, it really stuck with me. I didn't have any expectations when it came to Badlands National Park, and maybe that's all on me. In fact, it is all on me. It's one of those, like, I think places like Yellowstone, Yosemite, Glacier, they get the lion's share of what people pay attention to when it comes to national parks. And then in May or so this year, we, Amy and I went to Alaska. And so we spent time in Denali, which also gets its lion's share of press. And then Wrangell St. Elias and Kenai Fjords. And these are just like jaw-dropping. But Badlands is almost like a complete 180 from those as far as just like landscape and animals and press and everything else. And I think I was kind of going into it almost wanting to be underwhelmed, or almost prepared to be, not wanting, but prepared to be underwhelmed by this amazing park. And man, it punched me in the face, and I deserved it. It absolutely did. This park left its mark on me. I keep thinking about it. I keep wanting to go back, especially for some hiking. Now, if you're just heading in from the east side of the park, I guess, is if you're on 240 coming from like Phillips, South Dakota, like I said, from the Minuteman, you'll pass that overlook, the big Badlands overlook, which is awesome. But then you're immediately given these trails. And I said we didn't hike any trails, but we did stop in a couple of trail parking lots. And the first one is Door Trail. Now, Door Trail has a short boardwalk path that leads to basically a panoramic, opening in the Badlands wall. And they call this section the Door. So this door is this opening to even more panoramic views of this amazing, just kind of marching, this alien type landscape of the Badlands. And all around there, this whole area, they have the Door Trail, the Window Trail, Notch, and Castle trails as well. And they're all like right next to each other virtually. So even though we didn't hike, the trailhead still provided a close look at the terrain. The Door Trail, like I said, begins with that boardwalk. It leads to the door and then the Badlands wall. And you get these formations that are amazing. Once again, visiting with a dog changes stuff. That's every national park. If you've listened to anything about our road trips and the national parks that we visited over the course of this season alone, you'll know that your dog is not allowed in a lot of places. They're generally permitted in like campgrounds, picnic areas, parking areas, and even roads that are open to vehicles. But, you know, they can't go on a lot of trails. Badlands kind of works for a park area with a dog because so many of the major views are accessible from roadside overlooks. So he got out at plenty of stops and looked at the overlook. And I mean, I don't know what he was thinking, but he had to be thinking, all right, this is cool. I mean, he was mainly just sniffing the ground and, you know, claiming territory as dogs are wont to do. We took him later down the road, down the loop a little bit, is the Ben Rifle Visitor Center. Okay, we continued on to the Visitor Center facility in the northern part. They call it the North Unit. It's a good place to stop for get your orientation about you, get some maps and some ranger information. They do have restrooms and water, stuff like that, fossil exhibits. There's a film on the park, I believe it was going on, so we didn't stop and check it out. But and also gives you like the current road conditions because they can't have closures at any given moment, right? The fossil preparation lab that they have, the fossil preparation lab really allows visitors to kind of watch paleontologists working on specimens during their operating periods. Now, this is not an everyday thing, but they do have periods where real live paleontologists will be in the working on specimens that they find in the park. And that's crazy. Like I said earlier, most of these specimens are going to be like ancient horses and camels that roam North America. It's not so much like the T-Rex or Brachiosaurus or Stegosaurus, Triceratops. I'm trying to think of all the freaking dinosaurs I can remember. Those are the only ones I can ever remember. But they're actually in there. Paleontologists. I think that's more amazing than anything else. So you kind of get into a rhythm as well. We started getting into like what I would dub like the overlook rhythm. Our visit just kind of had that movement to it, right? You would drive several miles, you stop at an overlook, you walk far enough out to take in the view with the dog, and then you return to the air conditioning of the car. It was so hot. And then you just repeat. You carry, if you're like us, you carry a cooler with drinks in it. Oh, those drinks and those waters, they saved us so many days. Oh my gosh, so much time. Because once you're in there, again, outside the visitor centers and small little areas, I think there was a convenience store right before the entrance of the Badlands. It had gas. It was a gas station. So there's one like right before, and I think there's one at the end. But like in the middle of the park, really just the visitor center. And sometimes they don't have all the pickings that you might want, right? So you do this, you repeat time and time again, but the overlooks are not interchangeable. That's the great part. You get into the rhythm, but every overlook, I think each one emphasizes something different. You had some that emphasized the deep gullies, others, the sharp pinnacles. Still others had, wide prairies that just went on forever. Then you also had the ones that highlighted the colored geological layers. Others, the scale of the Badlands wall itself. We were in one area when we first saw our very first bison. I think it was the beginning of the Sage Creek Road, which is this gravel road out there. But like looking over this kind of part of the land where the wall drops off, you saw a like tiny river going through, and we saw bison out in the distance by itself, hanging out, grazing. But like you could see for miles, very little shade. But the water was gleaming in the sun, and the bison was out there, and it was like, what is this place? Like, we just drove through South Dakota, and there was an area there that I looked at Amy and I was like, we might die out here. There's literally nothing out here. This might be the most remote location in any state I've ever traveled, and the United States in general. And that's not a knock on South Dakota. There was just, have you ever been on a cruise and you just look out into the ocean and it just suddenly hits you that you're just on this small little boat, no matter how big it is, even if it's one of the new ones that's huge, you're still on this small little boat in the middle of like nowhere. It's kind of crazy. You think about it. If I think about it, start having like panic attacks. So notable areas along the loop. Let me move forward, right? The big Badlands overlook I talked about. The White River Valley overlook. It looks across the drainage responsible for much of the landscape's erosion, shows how the formations kind of descend toward the valley. Another one is Panorama Point. It's big, wide, open view across more layers of formations. And then the Yellow Mounds. The Yellow Mounds are really unique, right? So they're rounded formations with yellow, red, and purple bands where I think ancient soils were oxidized and different things. I'm sure a real scientist could tell you something about how these purple and red and yellow bands formed, but these unusual colors do come from ancient soils exposed after those inland seas retreated. Remember? I told you about that. Also another one to mark down, the Prairie Wind Overlook and the Pinnacles Overlook. The Pinnacles is one of the most expansive views. It's near the western end of the paved loop. It's also a good area for spotting bighorn sheep. Don't forget about the animals, right? You're going to start seeing prairie dog mounds everywhere, and prairie dogs are cute, but you also see little signs that say that they can sometimes get plague. Yeah. Don't let your children play with prairie dogs. Don't let them be cowboys, but also don't let them play with prairie dogs because for some reason they get the plague. I don't know. I thought we wiped out all of that out. Did we wipe out the plague? Anyway, does skipping the trails ruin the visit? It's kind of a question I ask myself. No, but it changes the visit. But we still experienced all the major geological formations, most of the important overlooks, the visitor center, the prairie ecosystem, the wildlife along Sage Creek Road, all of this stuff. Hiking adds that closer look at the formations and the textures, but a sense of being, and it kind of, I guess it would add a sense of being inside the landscapes instead of just checking them out and viewing them from traffic. But overall, look, in the extreme heat, forcing a hike simply to say we hiked it, I think it would have been a bad idea in general. Do you disagree? Hit me up on scaletravelshow.com. Let me know. Does hiking make or break a national park? I don't think it does. Keep it right here on Scale. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unskilled Travel Show. Smashing stuff here in the studio. Before I go much further, I do want to tell you guys, I mentioned it a couple of times about, if you don't know the place, Wall Drug, right? So Wall Drug Store is, it begins long before you ever reach the town of Wall, South Dakota. I mentioned its highway signs appear across South Dakota and sometimes far beyond it, advertising all kinds of stuff. 5-cent coffee, free ice water, food, souvenirs, And of course, the ever decreasing distance to Wall Drugstore. And they have a lot of homemade donuts. But how it started is kind of interesting. Ted and Dorothy Husted purchased a small drugstore in Wall in 1931. The town only had a few hundred residents. I don't think it has many more than that now. But with the Depression already underway, business was poor. In 1936, though, Dorothy noticed travelers crossing the hot prairie on their way to the Black Hills, right? The Black Hills of South Dakota, Deadwood, places like that. Her idea was simple. Advertise free ice water. The Husteds placed signs along the highway, and wouldn't you know, it worked. Travelers stopped for the free ice water, and then while they were there, they purchased ice cream, food, and other supplies. Over time, the small pharmacy expanded into a sprawling roadside complex that covers roughly 76,000 square feet. It is an amazing store to go visit. Wall Drug now contains a couple of restaurants, Western art, gift shops, a chapel, an animatronic Tyrannosaurus Rex, and of course, a giant jackalope. What is a jackalope? Well, ask your mother. Enough souvenirs to outfit the entire state. And it still offers free ice water and, yes, 5-cent coffee. That is not a made-up thing. You can get free ice water, 5-cent coffee. We did. After we visited the Badlands, we ended the sightseeing portion of our day right there. It was crowded. It was commercial and excessive, over the top in some points, but that is the point in all of this. They do an amazing job of advertising because there's no way that ordinary people would show up in the droves that we saw. Every parking space was filled in this very small town in South Dakota. If it weren't for this little local secret, that's not a local secret. Okay. It's a full roadside Americana experience. And it's built around one of the most effective advertising campaigns in tourism history. I kid you not. Now, we also had the dog. Dog couldn't go in. The dog stayed with me. Amy went inside. We traded and everything. It's one of these places you got to see to believe. They had some dinosaurs you could sit on in the back. They had a jackalope you could sit on. Again, what's a jackalope? Ask your mama. Ask your grandmama. I'm not going to explain it. It's a family show here. Okay? Be nice. Unscaled Travel Show. Yeah, we love Wall Drugstore. Can't wait to go back. Keep it right here. Yeah, we got more. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unscaled Travel Show. Jeremy Long here in beautiful Sin City, Las Vegas in the Diamondback Land Surveying Studios. Man, this show is so much better when Amy's involved. I miss her. I hope she's feeling better. I really do, man. We appreciate all of our affiliates that carry our show. We're getting some new ones. I think we just opened up in Maryland. And of course, afterwards, we place it all on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Go check it out. Please subscribe. Please leave us some 5-star reviews. We appreciate it. I know it's kind of not that thing anymore. Like people are kind of over leaving reviews unless you're a restaurant and unless it's Yelp and you've done something bad. People don't like to leave reviews anymore, but please, five stars. Not for this episode. I know you guys miss Amy on this one. So anyway, I'm on the loop. We're on the loop in Badlands National Park, but we decide it's time to leave the paved road and get a little out there to try to see bison and some more animals. We had seen one or two off in the distance up to this point. Again, it was 1,000,000 degrees this day. I honestly wasn't thinking, I was thinking we weren't going to see anything because it was so hot. It was the middle of the day by now, but we decided, hey, you know what? We did hear a ranger talking about Sage Creek Rim Road. Now, near the western end of the main loop road is Sage Creek Rim Road. This kind of changes the character of the visit. The pavement road gets left behind. It turns into gravel. It's not an extremely rough road, but I wouldn't go out there in a Nissan Altima. Okay. If you have an SUV or something slightly elevated, something like that, you should be fine. It doesn't need to be 4x4 necessarily. But the traffic will, of course, will thin out, even though we saw one or two other vehicles on the road out there. But the formations kind of open into this prairie life, and wildlife begins becoming, hopefully, the primary attraction if you're out there. The road is usually manageable, like I said, when it's dry. If it's super wet or just a rain just came through and you're in a vehicle that you might give a pause for, like, I don't know. I would think about it before I went out. Because rain can quickly make all of that muddy, rutted, temporarily impassable. So just, you know your vehicle. Anyway, so Sage Creek brought us closer to the park's bison without a doubt. The Badlands reintroduced bison in 1963 with 50 animals that were transferred from Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I don't know if you knew that, but today the herd numbers more than 1,000. We did see bison when we went on Sage Creek Road. We did not see the main herd. We saw some stragglers. We saw the guy that was down by the river. We saw a couple other guys that were just kind of hanging out together. I don't know what they were doing. Maybe they got kicked out. I don't know. Maybe they were just in a mood. They just wanted to be left alone. So all in all, we did see a handful of bison. We saw tons of prairie dog. We saw some, I think some bighorn sheep or some, what are they called? Yeah, some sheep. We saw some sheep and some, I think some deer, like the pronged horn deer. So they're like the smaller ones. They're not like giant elk or anything like that. Of course, your basic rules are on bison, because we've already this year alone seen some videos come out of Yellowstone of people doing questionable things. And of course, when people do questionable things around bison tend to react in questionable ways, right? Stay at least 25 yards away. 2, you can't outrun it. So don't try. Like, don't think, oh, I can get close enough to it and then immediately get away. My speed. No. The bison has amazingly quick top speed. And then, like, you ain't run that fast. Look, be honest. We're all people of a certain age that listen to this show. You ain't run that fast since, what, 8th grade? And now you think you're going top speed with a bison approaching you? No. Come on, man. You ain't going to do it. Remain in your vehicle when they approach the road. I just saw one in Yellowstone. It popped the tire of a car that was on the road doing everything right. And a bison was just, he decided to lower his head and bust the tire on an SUV. Sometimes it just be like that. Never place yourself between members of a herd. You don't know the tea. You don't know the gossip that's going on between the bison. You don't know the drama. If you put yourself between, oh my Lord, you put yourself between a baby, a calf, and its mama, or somebody's grandmama, you don't know. Okay. Don't ever mistake their stillness, because they're just standing there sometimes and you're like, is this dude dead? He's standing up dead. But like, don't mistake that stillness for tameness. Bison can run to up to, like, I think it's like 30 miles an hour. 30 miles per hour. That's fast. That's faster than, like, I don't know, an NFL receiver running down the field fast, like all kinds of stuff, man. But you still see it. You still see people do it all the time. Also, the prairie dogs, right? So Sage Creek also passes these large black-tailed prairie dog colonies. They're everywhere. Prairie dogs are very entertaining to watch. They stand at their burrow entrances. They'll call in warnings out to each other. They're, yipping back and forth. They're diving underground. They're reappearing a few yards away. We saw a bunch of them playing. They were playing together. These colonies of prairie dogs are very important to the ecosystem, believe it or not, even though farmers in different areas see them as pests. In these areas where they're protected, the burrows provide shelter for not only the prairie dogs, but for other species. The grazing that they have, I saw a couple of them, they were just going to town. They were going to town on the vegetation, but it changes the surrounding vegetation. They are primary. They are the primary prey of the endangered black-footed ferret. We talked about the black-footed ferret earlier, but, it's the circle of life kind of stuff. Elton John wrote about it, right? Do not feed the prairie dogs. It's dangerous for both you and the animal. I feel like I shouldn't have to repeat myself there. I also need to do more research on that plague thing. Like, why? Why did they have plague? Did they get it from humans? I'm so confused by all of that. They're cute, though. They're very cute to watch. And I got some great videos and great pictures of prairie dogs. But, don't be going out there and giving them a Ritz cracker or anything. Like, stay in your car, bro. Come on. Other wildlife you can watch for. Bighorn sheep. Okay. Pronghorns. Mule deers. The bighorn sheep are often seen around the rocky formations, like the western overlooks. I circled a couple of points. The pronghorns are more likely in open prairie. We saw a couple of pronghorn. They were just kind of out by themselves. Mule deer, very common around the grasslands. There's even times, probably in the evenings or early mornings, you'll see coyotes. Okay, sometimes you can see them hunting near the prairie dog towns. They love a prairie dog snack. But if you have the kids with you, understand that it's not a Disney movie. Okay, and if you can afford the therapy bills, then go ahead, let them watch. We did see something like that in Denali. It was crazy to watch. Coyote eat breakfast. It was amazing to watch. And again, the black-footed ferrets, they were reintroduced after the species was once believed to be extinct, and they've had a rebound. They're nocturnal. They're extremely difficult for visitors to spot because they are nocturnal, again. But if you're out there late at night or watching the stars or something, also, watch where you step, especially around rocks, through the grass, prairie dog colonies, places, because you'll find oftentimes the prairie rattlesnake. Another thing is to consider in the summertime, spring and summer times, is mosquitoes. We found this out the hard way. Walked through a grassy area, not thinking anything about it. My legs, when I say I was covered in mosquitoes, I was covered in mosquitoes all over my shirt, all over my legs, my back, my arms. Oh man, it was nuts. And that was through a little bitty section between pavement. Like I thought I'd just take a quick, I'm just going to cut through this grass real quick. My legs were covered. And when I smacked them, well, you can imagine smacking a bunch of mosquitoes. So bring you some spray and just stay out the grass. That's probably the easiest thing. Just stay out the grass. Again, I mentioned it a while ago. Once you leave Badlands National Park, you'll come across the Minuteman Missile National Historic Sites. So basically, the Cold War story sits directly behind the Badlands experience. So it has this historic site, has 3 separate locations. There's the Visitor Center near Phillips, South Dakota. If you're coming from the Sioux Falls way, okay, it's right off of I-90. It's on one side of the highway. Badlands opens up on the other side. They have the Delta 01 Launch Control Facility. All of these you can find on Google Maps or Apple Maps. The Delta 01 Launch Control Facility, this is where they would launch the missiles or give the orders or whatever. And then there's the Delta 09 missile silo. It has strict hours. I think it's open from 9 to 3 p.m. because it's government. It's still government. It's still watched over by those who watch us. It was closed when I went, but you can go in and get pictures through the glass roof of the dummy missile that sits down there. It's a very cool experience if you can do it. It wasn't something I wanted to come back and do because whatever. But during the Cold War, 1,000 of these Minuteman missiles stood on constant alert across the Great Plains. They were intentionally hidden in plain sight amongst the farms, the ranches, and small towns. So it was like a known secret. So stop there at the Minuteman after the Badlands. Check it all out. There's a lot to do out there, even when there doesn't seem like there's a lot to do out there. Definitely go to Mitchell, South Dakota. Definitely check out the Corn Palace. We'll see you guys next time. It's Unscaled Travel Show.